everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. Thanks for joining us today for another episode. Today we have our new friend and guest for today's episode, Kyle Somersall. Kyle's with us today in our little studio in our apartment to record an in-person episode. We met Kyle through a virtual class online where we were kind of talking all about money and all of the reasons why we struggle to see money clearly and all of our past experiences with it. So we brought Kyle on today because he's a holistic business coach and a hypnotherapist, and he's also an artist. You know, we're not trying to box anyone into too many boxes, but Kyle talks all about this stuff, and we're on a point in our journey right now where our relationship with money is becoming an interesting topic because you start to peel back all the layers in life and you see all the things in your past that are implicating your relationships and the way that you treat your partner or your fears about people judging you. And then for me personally, and both of us, me and Daisy both, we got to this point in the journey where we were like, money. That seems like another one we got to unravel, right? And now we're kind of at the point where we're recognizing that the way I viewed money has been so scarce. Like, it's been in such a way of not trusting that I will be able to make it or I will be able to make money. And, you know, we've thought a lot about back in like society, and we talk a lot on this podcast about conditioning and how there is so much fear in this society. So I think that's kind of the general gist of what I wanted to start off the conversation today is maybe by asking you the question of how would you say generally and briefly like your experience or your view with money has changed in the past, you know, throughout your life?
Yeah. That's a beautiful question. And I'm really happy to be here. So thank you both for having me. And yeah, money. So I'd say both of my parents are immigrants. So what I saw in my household was stress with money and hoarding. And even when we got to a point, because my mom's really good at saving, we got to a point where like, all right, we're okay, you know, but at the same time, there was still so much stress around money. So my relationship with money was I didn't believe that I could really make the money that I wanted in my business, in my life, and I wasn't fully aware that I had a lot of these beliefs. And I also was putting money on a pedestal and seeing it as, you know, indicators of success and seeing it as something that I needed to chase. You know, all the rap songs were telling me, you got to chase it, you know. And where I'm at now, I really see it as a relationship and similar to like all other relationships. And I see it as a sort of a mirror to help me see what parts of me don't feel as worthy or need more love or need more attention. And I feel like whatever relationship you have with other people, it's going to show up often with money. There's other variables as well. But if we think about attachment theory, right, if you have an anxious attachment or of an avoidant attachment or a fearful avoidant attachment, that's how you're going to relate to money as well. And so that's been really eye-opening as I've been healing and creating more security in myself with my partner, with friends. I'm able to also see how that same work translates to my relationship with money as well. So it's really been a tool to help me expand and heal in the ways I want. And now I think the big thing, a big shift is I went from seeing it as like a scarce thing to seeing it as like separate for me in a way. And now I'm like, oh, it just comes through me. You know, I am the value creator, you know, and it's a co-creation with this whole thing, but it's like I can trust more, you know, of my ability to generate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This journey with money is quite new for me. So hearing your like whole story with it of where you started and where you are now, it really helps contextualize that it is possible to change your relationship with money. But I think throwing into like my perspective of like my experience is that I've been on this journey of trying to understand things for like 3 years now, and it's just getting to money. It's just getting to, there's so much fear with money that it really keeps us captive to thinking we're never going to be able to get more of it. In a recent experience I've been having, a recent thought is, right now I don't have a job. I quit my job. I have savings. I have enough savings to pay for my life right now. I don't need a job. And that's a hard one to go over. It's like, I don't need a job right now. But most society will be like, well, are you saving money for your future house, for your future family? Are you saving money for your future things? And what I've recognized and turned on the head is that, well, what about this very moment? What if I'm able to appreciate things in this very moment? And I think going back to this moment, it's like, well, this moment is also where you make money. And that's where it gets fun, like the creativity with it. And I feel like you have a lot of creativity associated with money because you have been so creative in how you make money. And I would be curious to hear how you got started in the creative realm and how your relationship with money has changed over time with specifically, like the creative components. Yeah.
I was teaching third grade for my first 3 years after graduating, right? So that was my relationship to money. It's like twice a month you get paid. I was making like $60,000 a year, and I was like, well, this is more money than I've ever made in my life, But I knew, like, I saw some of my investment banker friends, and they were making over 100K, and I was like, okay, fine, but like I'm good. I'm still going on vacation, etc. I'm fine. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't want to teach in this capacity anymore. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to school because I was still thinking you need a path. I was like, I'm gonna become a psychologist, weave in, mindfulness with, psychotherapy, and then I was like, wait a minute, that means I need to do research now to get into these PhD programs. Well, how am I going to make money if I'm sitting here doing free research all day? So then I was like, wow, what am I doing? And so then I was like, okay, well, how else can I make money? What skills do I have? So I was like, I can tutor. I've been a teacher. I have a master's in education. Let me tutor. So that was the first way. I was like, oh, we can do this. And I was really scared at this point because my school was paying me through the summer, which gave me 2 months to like not be working and kind of figure it out. But I was like, whoa, where do I go from here? And then my friend was moving out, and I was like, great, I'll Airbnb his room. So then I had the Airbnb and the tutoring, and then I was doing the free research. And I was like, wow. And then it got to the point with those two things, I was actually making more money than I was making as a teacher. And I was like, wait a minute, this is different. And then I was burning myself out. So I left the Airbnb situation, started building my initial company, my first company, Interglow. And that's when I really started rubbing up against money stuff, because it was events where I was inviting people. And I remember my first event, I was like, how much can we charge? I remember I charged $16. We got 60 people to come, which was like solid for a first event, but it's like I can't pay my rent with that. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, well, what are we doing here? And then we started doing services where it just happened. My friend worked at Whitney Museum. She hooked me up with them. My friend worked at Warner Music. He hooked me up there. I had other friends working at companies, and they were like, hey, you can do work here. But I was way undercharging that whole time, and yeah, it honestly got to the point where I like quit all the services that I was doing and was like, I'm just going to do the company. I'm just going to do the community element, because I was looking to raise VC funding and like build a VC backed startup. And that journey brought me to like running out of money and having to like ask my mom for help and ask friends for help. And it was a blessing in disguise, because I remember getting to that point. I thought we were going to have two people invest, and then we just needed more time. And then, I was like, shit, I don't have money. Like, what are we doing? And I remember I had so much shame just from my history of asking for help. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm just going to ask my friends. And so I ended up asking friends. Within an hour, I had more than the amount of money that I needed to like pay the bills. And then like 2 days later, I got a check in the mail from like half of the sessions I was supposed to do with Whitney Museum, because I ended up only doing half because I was like, I want to build this community. This is what my investor people are telling me I need to do. So anyways, I ended up having like a decent amount of money, and then someone that I had tutored with in the past, I was like, hey, he ran like a tutoring company. I was like, hey, do you need people? He was like, yes, come this Saturday. So I went from like, holy shit, I'm about to get kicked out of my apartment, to like, oh, no, we're chilling. And it just, I think the big lesson I got there was like, ask for what you need. And that was a big thing. And then unlearning shame about making mistakes or needing help. And then, yeah, with my most recent company, that's been a whole journey of seeing how money related to my self-worth. Because a lot of my resistance to charging early on, or putting myself out there, or saying what I was doing, was there was a lot going on. But part of it was like not feeling worthy of receiving that money. Fear like of being abandoned or rejected in a way. And that really allowed me to tie it back to so much of my childhood and really be able to heal a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah, there's some other elements in there, but that's a part of the story of creation.
No, that was incredible. I feel emotional because like that's an incredible story, because it's like I've gone back and forth in my head of every dollar I have, I'm worried, oh, like what if I lose it, or what if I don't have enough to have a lifestyle I want? But what I took away from those moments of where you had to get really creative with making money, it's when you needed to make it, and you know what, you made it, and then you made more. And that moment where you're like, I got more money than I expected when I thought I couldn't pay my rent, like I feel like that's the inexplainable, incommunicatable beauty of taking the risk into uncertainty. And I think the way you painted that picture, like I hope it helps people understand that anyone can do it if you're willing to take the risk. And is it ever going to be as bad as you think it is? Or will that just force you to get more creative?
Yeah, to figure it out. And I will say, thank you for marrying that to me. And I will say, another thing that I learned in that process, because this feels valuable, is I started really building my literacy and my intelligence around money. So like I remember reading like I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, right? And he was telling me about, okay, here's how you automate, a deposit to like your savings, or here's what you should do as far as investing or paying off debt and all that stuff. And so not only did that situation teach me, hey, ask for what you need, get creative, but it also taught me like, but look at your money and like have a better relationship with it, and like take care of it, and be mindful of like, what do you want to spend it on, and what might you be spending it on that you don't care to spend it on. And so I think there's both like having care for it, and also like taking risks and knowing that you can be creative and being able to trust yourself. I think you need both, because I don't want to encourage anyone to be like, oh, I'm not going to look at my bank account. Let's just be out here free. It's like you want the freedom, but I do think you need a certain level of security to be able to get creative. I got to be honest. I knew that I could move back in with my parents. I knew that I could ask my mom for help and she would still be okay, so that did give me some safety, although I was like, I'm definitely not asking my mom, because it's going to come with a bunch of stuff that I don't want, but the universe was like, no, you're going to have to ask her, and you're going to have to figure out all the discomfort that comes with that too, which was, yeah, I think it's but I think to your point, sometimes the worst thing that's going to happen is that we'll have to ask for help, but maybe that's what you need. To be okay with asking for help, asking for what you need,
For sure. I feel like I have so many thoughts to everything that I just said. So I'm going to back up a little bit. I think it was really interesting when you're painting this picture of like you graduating college and becoming an educator, and then kind of recognizing maybe you want to go on a different path, and then getting in the pursuit of VC funding and going down what people tell you is the right way to raise money, right? Or to build a company. And whenever I think of that, I always think it's like scale big, grow, 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 grow. So it's so interesting to hear you like kind of try to go down the path that everyone recommends to get this funding, to build a company in the way that build by the books, right? Like some people say, do this, do this, do this. And then you do that. And then it's kind of like you end up in this place where you're kind of, falling down. You're like, what do I do? What do I do? This isn't working. And that just made me really think so clearly, like, society has taught us with money that, like, you have to go down certain paths to be successful. And I use quotes for successful because successful is so much more than your money, right? But to have an abundant amount of money, we need to go down certain paths. And like, I was a lawyer for 5 years and I just left my job. And this has been a huge realization for me of like, I can triple what I was making at that law firm through the journey I'm on. And so I think it's really interesting because I think it's so important to highlight, and your story really does, of like, question these stories and these narratives that people have told us about the path you need to go down to make money.
100%. I totally agree with that. I mean, to your point, so when I was talking to one of my friends who did have some VC funding for his company, he was like, okay, well, you're making most of your money from the services to these companies. Why don't you just double down on that and not build like this $1 billion rocket ship that you have in mind? And I was like, no, my ego was like, no, this is what we need to do. And he's like, okay, I guess he responded, I guess you're kind of like me, right? You're kind of stubborn. And I was like, yeah. And so there's a lot of pride there. I mean, everything worked out the way it needed to. But to your point, now I'm at a point where it's like, my company is going to do multi 6 figures this year. And I see how we are going to get to where I want to be, right? But I also see how, like, I don't have to build like, it doesn't have to be super big, right? And in fact, maybe we get to 2 million and we say we're good here, right? Because bigger usually means like more strain, more of so many things, right? And it's like, I don't necessarily need that or want that. So being able to get to a point where I'm like, I can separate money from my value, but also like, I do want to make a lot of money, but at the same time, it's like, I don't need to do it for my ego, where I'm like, if this isn't a $100 million company, then it's nothing. You know what I mean? Which is basically what the VC world looks like. It's like, if you don't scale to the moon, like, it's nothing. So someone could have $3 million a year in revenue, but like, because they got all this funding and because of the egos and all that, it's like, this is a failure. It's like, what?
I think this conversation is literally, I just find it so fascinating because it's like, we could talk about all the things we talk about, like in the spiritual world, philosophical world, but it's like, the ego is all money is, right? And it's like, it's so interesting, like everything you're saying of this desire for more. I want more to the point where, to our detriment, where we're staying at a job because we want to hit an arbitrary amount of money of, I want to make $1 million because then I'll be happy. And it's so interesting because like your story may just make me really think about like this concept of, I think really like our relationship with money, and not just, I don't know, I think a relationship is a broad word, but what I specifically think about is like this idea that we have to work so freaking damn hard to get to where we want to be. And I think what I've really been recognizing is that like the work is the emotional work. Like that's what I'm realizing, like you have to be ready to just not resist.
Yeah.
Is that all it really is? I'm curious to hear like this like perceived struggle that society has perpetuated, that you have to struggle, you have to suffer to make money and to be independent and be on your own. And we've gone through so much change the past 2 years and 3 years, and it's been a hell of a ride emotionally. And I feel like I've come to a realization where I'm like, I feel like I can go through anything now. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, is it really that hard, or is that all our mind?
That's a good question. This is a good question. Yes. So I remember when I first started my most recent company, that was one of the realizations I had. I was like, oh, things like when you describe it as the grind, or the hustle, or whatever we describe it as, that impacts how we feel about it. So it can be fun. It can come from a place that feels joyful, and that's possible. And at the same time, I feel like a part of the journey includes discomfort. And I feel like one of the reasons why I'm here is to help show that there's actually so much beauty in discomfort. There's actually so much beauty in the shadow, in the pain, because if I'm thinking about myself, I remember there was a point last year where we were growing faster. The business was going faster than like I anticipated. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? My nervous system, I freaked out. I was not ready to handle it. I was like, or should we blow this thing up? Like what's going on? But at the same time, then we had a dip after. But it was so necessary in hindsight, A, because I learned so much through that process, but also B, because now I appreciate it more. I was taking it for granted. I was like, why aren't we at 50K a month yet? Like this is so easy. And then I was like, oh no, like what? Like what's going on here? And so I think it's really valuable to go through the challenges so that you can appreciate it. You can have more gratitude for it. And it broadens your shoulders. You're able to have more resiliency because of what you've been through, is what I notice. It's like so much of growing the value of a company or bringing in more income is taking on more responsibility, creating more value for others. But that takes a lot from a nervous system standpoint to be able to handle. So you kind of need to do it in like a expansion, contraction, back and forth, so that you can get to the point where you're like, oh, I can hold this. Like, cool. I these people are depending on me. I can hold this. I committed to showing up this way. I can hold this. This feels good to me. And yeah, so there it's challenging. I think that's a big thing is I don't want to, a big realization I had is like, I don't want to sell people on like this get rich quick, like in 90 days you can blah, blah, blah. Cause it's not true. And it does a disservice to the effort that it does take. And like if someone wants to become a lawyer or become a doctor, like they know, okay, I gotta fucking go to medical school and I gotta figure it out and I have these exams. But because they have that expectation, they're not out here like, oh, 3 months have passed, why am I not like, why haven't I made it to what I want to make it yet? So I think it's value in saying, yeah, it's challenging, but I think the biggest challenge is like not what you have to do. It's really facing yourself. You just have to face all your shit and realize like, oh, this is here. And I think that's really what the biggest challenge is.
Very, very profound. I know I have so many thoughts marinating. That's why I think podcasting becomes so interesting, is when you have a million thoughts because who you're talking to is making you think a lot. But when you don't interrupt them and you let those thoughts just kind of like, you like actively listen, but you let those thoughts kind of just like, and you're like, when I talk, I don't know what's going to come out. But I really liked what you said about part of the journey is facing discomfort, and what you're about, or what you have found to be successful, is enjoying the discomfort. I think there's a lot there. I think when you were saying, when you were taking those risks and you knew you could ask for help at some level, but there were things that were going to come along with that. And maybe that is what you need. Same thing with, I wouldn't recommend anyone goes out there and like just lives in total abundance and doesn't look at their banking account, because what are you avoiding by not looking at your bank account? And it's like both are kind of like on the extreme ends of it. It's, you can't have one without the other. You can't have all the comfort without the sprinkles of discomfort. So really getting comfortable with the discomfort, it's fun. Once you start surrendering to it, saying what I need to be shown right now is happening, no matter what. Like I will say, like I feel like I have been like the last 2 weeks I've been going, and I'm surrendering to this conversation right now because it's an incredible conversation. I knew if I was like in my head, I would miss it, and I feel like that connects to what you just said, because this is exactly what I need, is to be grounded and to be immersed. I think there's always lessons we can be learned, especially at the ones that we resist the most.
100%. Ooh, yeah, that's a bar. There's always lessons to be learned, especially the ones we resist the most. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. Yes.
And we can spend our entire lives running from one thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's maybe not that big, but it gets bigger as we run away from it.
I was also just going to say quickly, like, I think it's so interesting because what we might not recognize is like that need for our business, wherever we're creating, to reach that number we want, is because we are still running away from ourselves. Like, what is that need in you to have all this money? What is that need in you to have all this external validation, to have this company? It's like you start this venture and it starts from maybe a creative point. And that's even a question of, did it start from a creative point for a lot of people? And I think it's no one's fault because we are all fear-based. We all have this evolutionary brain. But I think it's so interesting of like, we're attaching to the outcome or attaching to this like end goal idea of when I'm making 100K from my business, I won't have to deal with this pain. I won't have to deal with these emotions. And it's just, I had that recognition the other day where I was like caught up in my head about the podcast and just creating narratives. And I was like talking to Daisy about it. I was just like, I don't know why it's so interesting. I keep projecting my emotions onto thinking that like the podcast is not where I want it to be. And it really hit me. And I've thought about this concept countless times. But you know, when you like are thinking about something and it really hits you in that moment, that's what happened, where I was just like, I think that if I was making X amount of money from the podcast, this emotion I'm experiencing now wouldn't come up. And I was like, yes, this is it. This is exactly why we put so much pressure on the things we're building, because we subconsciously think those things will heal this discomfort we're feeling in the moment. But that discomfort could go back to when you're 5 years old. Dude, I just think it's insane. And I think if we could, when we're doing the work while we're building things, and we can have the recognition that we're not going to feel better when you do have that successful business, you have so much less pressure because you can put your feet on the ground. You can look and be like, I am where I am now. And maybe there's a lot of shit I need to look at first for me to really be grounded in this process. So I just think that like everything in this conversation, I'm just like, whoa, like this is all connecting so much, because it's like money is like everything we talk about in this podcast. Like this can just connect, it just connects to everything.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I was thinking a little bit about what you just shared, where you're realizing like, oh, getting to this outcome isn't actually going to solve what I'm feeling right now. And I feel like at least for my journey, I feel like part of the healing process has been, you know, on an intellectual level, I got that, but also like having to go through it and get what I want, you know, and then be able to see like, oh, I got it now. And I don't feel any different than I did. And hopefully we can do that earlier. Maybe if we go back to like when we were kids and we got toys on Christmas, or maybe if we can look at relationships or other things maybe that we've gotten. But for me, I had to learn that lesson so many times, you know, and then what really stood out to me is sometimes you get what you want and then you end up lower than you were before you got it, because you thought that was going to save you and it didn't save you. So you're like, what?
It kind of makes me think of like the original quote of, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it. Or like, I got everything I wanted and I'm miserable. And it makes me think of like, there is this inherent balance to life, or even kind of the idea we're told to have of spend your life working, you know, get a comfortable paycheck so you can, and like, you know, contribute to like your retirement. And then once you hit 65, I think it is, you can just let go and relax. But I don't think that's how it is. I think that, like you said, like money, like if we look at like concepts, like money doesn't really exist. It's just a form of energy. And if we're just on autopilot, or if we're just doing nothing or not doing the work, is the money going to come? I don't think so, because I feel like when you break it down, life is full of ups and downs. And as long as you're rolling with those, like sometimes you'll have money, maybe sometimes you won't. Sometimes I think we have this idea of like everything has to be so cookie cutter to where we know how everything is going to unfold. But I think life is like the exact opposite point. And I'm starting to like learn that with money, because what you said with like relationships is what the relationship you have with money. I'm definitely avoidant. Like looking at my bank account gives me anxiety. And it's like, you can't sway onto one far end of the spectrum of not knowing why, you know, why am I afraid? But it's like, maybe the work is looking at it so I can be reminded. Maybe there's going to be some clues there as to what I can work through so that I'm not afraid to look at my bank account. It's much deeper, like, you know, like you said, like going back to when you were a kid. So I really like that idea, especially with money, realizing that if you're trying to avoid it or whatever your relationship with is it, go head on into it. And I'm saying that, telling myself I'm gonna do that, because yeah, like you said, like intellectually, it's one thing to recognize healing in this, but it's another to embody it by constantly
100%.
embodying it, constantly coming up to the
Yeah,
challenge.
and I think to that point, I see so much of the work as being able to be softer with ourselves, being able to be more graceful, more loving with ourselves, right? Because a lot of the ways sometimes we approach challenges, there's like this power through method. And I do think there's an element of like, yeah, approach your fears, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, our fears, our anxieties, all that stuff, they can also be portals for us to be like, okay, well, what is this part of me trying to communicate, right? Because if you can imagine a young kid, right, and maybe it's like, if I think about myself, right, I had an avoidant relationship with money as well, right? And so my thing was like, if I made mistakes as a kid, I was punished, in ways that weren't great, right? I needed to be perfect. The only way I really felt like I was getting love is if I got like really good grades. And really the love was like, okay, now there's like less chaos. Now it feels like people are like chilling. I'm like the kid keeping everything together. I'm the good boy, right? And so now I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what I'm doing with money. I can't be the good boy. I can't be perfect. I need to avoid this. If I make a mistake, I let my mom down. I might get yelled at. I might get hit. There's all this stuff that's coming, right? So this is all of the energy being projected on the money, right? And then there, on one hand, I can be like, dude, just look at your bank account, get over it, like whatever, right? But that's me treating that little boy the same way he's been treated his whole life. Like, get over it. Like, what are you doing? Like, right? But if I'm able to then look at it and be like, ooh, like, what's here? Oh, you're scared about this? That's real. I acknowledge that. I'm going to be present with what you want to say to me. Your whole life, no one's paid attention. I'm going to be present. What do you want to say? What do you want to express? You're really mad? You want to stomp? You want to yell? But whatever it is, right? And that softening, then it makes it so much easier to go now look at my bank account, because it's like, oh, I was scared of getting in trouble. And now that I know this, I'm the one in charge now. Oh, we're not going to get in trouble. Oh, okay. I see you. You're okay. You want to cry because you're upset? All right, we'll give you space for that. But we're going to go look at it now because you're not going to get in trouble. You're going to be okay. And just having that, like really coaching myself through it and being able to soften has been helpful, because my earlier approach was much more like, get over it, which doesn't actually help because my nervous system's freaking out. It's like, last time I did this, I got in trouble. It wasn't good, And so just being able to validate ourselves, I think, is so powerful.
That's powerful. Yeah. I think a lot of the times when people talk about these concepts, it can be like, well, how do I apply that? But I think you painted that really well, because I think everyone has a feeling that comes up. And it's like, for me, I'm like, oh, I think it's shame. It's like, oh, you're irresponsible. You're not doing it right. But you said you're the adult, so no one's gonna like get mad at you. So that's what was most powerful to me, is that you are in control.
Yeah. And I think at the same time too, it's like, I really want to emphasize this, that like, our body doesn't know what our mind knows. Our mind knows we are the adult, right? And I think the healing, it's happening at these different layers. It's the mental layer, the heart layer, and the body layer. And the body layer is a layer that a lot of the times gets neglected because it's uncomfortable. But like mentally, you can be like, oh, I'm in charge now. You can coach yourself through it. But your body might still be like, I need to process what happened last time and when someone made me feel like I was irresponsible. Like whoever it was that like, projected all their stuff onto you or wasn't compassionate. The body's like, I need you to feel this and recognize what's here. It's really important to recognize our body is still responding like the child version of us until we process these things. So we need to treat it like a child, and treat it like how we would speak to a child and how we would take care of a child, and so that we can have that grace and that acceptance that then allows us to like respond in a different way.
You very much embody this concept. Like So the listeners, this is an in-person podcast, but you definitely embody that, because I think a lot of the times it's so easy to spend our life disconnected from that child, which still drives us, but you just feel very grounded. Like, I feel like it's contagious. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's like I can feel that I can just feel I feel it. And it's really powerful. And I think it's incredibly grounding. Money and this like chaos and this like, you experience all these emotions that you think is coming from the money, but it's just, what if it really is that inner child talking to you? And this is just another platform that we've expressed these feelings. I want to ask, so in this whole realization you had of changing your relationship to money and softening more, how have you seen like relaxing by paying attention to this inner child, by paying attention to the real cause of the anxiety and discomfort of feeling like you can't make money, you don't have enough money, shame about money? How has that softening impacted your actual ability to make money? Because it makes me think about how, for me, like on our journey, I'm just like, I have not been relaxed because, that's a whole another conversation of all the healing. But it's like, by not being relaxed, we are getting in the way of what life or the universe or us, or since we're everything, has in store for us. So like, how have you seen on your journey the switch of, and I guess it's almost like I feel like I picture that VC search kind of I have no idea, but I like picture it tied into this like chaotic search kind of, and like I almost see this path of you coming into yourself like over the years after that and building this business and it being like really a vessel or vehicle for you to know you. And I think that's so beautiful. And I think naturally, no matter, of course you're freaking crushing it because you're just embodying yourself, right? And that's like so beautiful because that's the thing. I think that's all this ever is. And it's like, I don't know, this is like, it's making me emotional because I'm like, shit, like that, like you did this work of going through this journey and feeling all these really hard emotions and like looking at yourself and looking at that 5 or 7-year-old, and by doing that you let go, and now what? You're doing it. So I think it's beautiful, it's amazing, and yeah, I think it's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I received that. And yeah, how has it impacted me now? So I do want to be completely transparent. This journey has not felt like super linear at all. And I will say, so I do want to answer the question, but I do want to just be like totally honest. Like, I think the body is so wise, right? And so it gives us things in doses. So there were things that my body showed to me in different seasons of my life where it was like, okay, here's how you can be consistent. Here's how you can start making money. Here's how you can start showing up in front of people and speaking more, and you're good. And I'm like, oh, I figured this out. And then it's like, oh, no, you didn't figure it out. You want to get to that next level? Here's all the stuff in the way of that, So I would say one of the big things that I did notice was even after I started making money, I would always feel like I was going to lose it all. And if one thing didn't go according to plan, like let's say someone was like, hey, I'm ready to start Friday. And then Friday came and they like took long to pay or they like, I don't know, something else happened, or they were like, no, I don't. Or they were like, I actually need to pay Monday or Tuesday, whatever. I would literally go into a spiral. And it wasn't out of like, I'm not going to be able to eat. It was just like, I would completely dissociate, you know what I mean? I'd be just, in that freeze mode. And this was up until like, this was present for me even within the last 4 months, and it was just my step of the journey where my body was like, oh, now you're ready to deal with all this, because all underneath that was like really, really intense pain related to childhood of like, I need to control my environment or else I'm going to get violated in a way, And so like any form of uncertainty is not okay. I would go into a spiral. And so I had to look at that. And then I was like, oh, I have all this stuff around like safety, around like being able to advocate for myself, around like feeling powerful that I got to look at. And so I was forced to confront those. and create more security in my body, safety in my body. But I also realized often our relationship to the masculine energy is often related to like protection, safety. And so often our relationship to our fathers or like the masculine figure in our household, if that wasn't a super healthy relationship, then we have a really hard time trusting the universe, a really hard time trusting we'll be provided for, right? And then if there was any issues with mom or with the more feminine energy in the household, then often that manifests as us feeling like we can't be loved, we can't be accepted, we can't be taken care of in that way, right? And so what I realized is like this whole concept of surrender, like trust God, trust spirit, whatever, right? I remember in 2020, that clicked for me in a new way. And I was like, oh, I got it. We can trust. And then I'm spiraling 3 years later. I'm like, I thought I got this lesson already. But it was like, oh, no. Now you have to get it at a deeper level by looking at all this stuff. And now you can trust that you are taken care of even more. It's funny. I was actually looking at myself this month, in the most recent month, because I had moments where in all those moments where I'd spiral, it would almost always end up working out better than I thought it was going to work out. And then I'd be like, dude, why were you freaking out? Like, you're fine. But this past month I had moments where I would usually spiral and I was able to be like, oh my God, like you're chilling, like, okay, cool, like we're good. So that I had to like congratulate myself. I was like, oh, we've done some work.
You really put it really well of how growth is not linear with any relationship, and how it's not linear because you peel one layer off, 3 years later you pull 3 layers off, 4 or 5, and you just keep going deeper. And I just think that is, I don't know, I'm marinating with all of those things that you were just saying, because it's all so powerful. It all comes, like, it's all applicable to almost everything in life, but money is one of those things that is, it's just undeniable. And honestly, I feel like this conversation is symbolizing so much for me. So that's why I'm having a hard time like articulate what I want to say, because it's really powerful. Because I feel like I've been so much in the mind, like the intellect of thinking, but so disconnect from the body, from the emotions, from the self, of the feelings. And so much of what you're saying is really the reason we started, one of the reasons, like when we started having guests in this podcast, because we were like, we want to facilitate allowing other people to let go, but like you're the one doing that in this conversation. Like you are grounding this conversation, and it really reminds me of the importance of no one, like I don't know, just because I'm having a lot of realizations, it doesn't mean I know crap, especially when I'm not connecting to myself. It's funny when like you're running around like with your head chopped off like you're a chicken, you start hitting walls and you're like, well, why why am I hitting this wall? And it's sitting with the discomfort. Yeah, that's what's awaiting me.
I love it.
But you really, it's really cool to see you embody all that.
Thank you.
It really
Thank
is.
you. That makes me feel good. And I see you too. I see you. This is beautiful.
I think it's interesting when we start to understand our relationship with money switches, and we feel confident about it, right? And then you go back into the world and people are like, but you left your job, or you're doing this, or you know, your family's like, but what are you gonna do? So I guess it's kind of a 2-part question of like, when you find yourself, I'm sure you do, like being in that fear that's in society, do you find yourself getting caught up in that, or do you feel like you're in a place now where you know for sure that like you're going on this path and this is the path?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. Where I'm at right now, no, I'm very certain in this path. Because I'm like, wait, I can make way more money than most jobs will pay me, and I can do what I want, and it can feel fun. So I've gotten to that point where I feel really confident with that. But then also what I'm realizing that's allowed me to feel a lot better in this process is really treating creation as a devotional practice. And so much of my life, I was trying to like manipulate the universe in a way. I was like, I'm going to do this so I can get this. or like, God, I'm doing it. Like, give me what you promised me, And, so I think about it a lot of like first seeing like yourself as a victim and like, why is this happening to me? And then seeing it like as, okay, everything is happening for you. And then seeing it as like, oh no, everything is happening through you. Like you are it, in a way. And so what that's where I've gotten to now is it's being like similar to the way like a musician will go to the studio and just devote. I imagine Drake just goes to the studio and was like, this is my studio time. I imagine, athletes, LeBron James, he's like, this is my time on the court, right? And I recall all the times where I fell in love with the process, whether it was like playing pickup basketball and I'd be in the gym 6 days a week, or creating my first magazine, or just times where I get in flow with writing. I'm like, that feels divine. I'm so happy when I'm in that flow. And what really pulls me out is when I attach that flow to like, what is the outcome of this going to be? And so I realize now it's just like, okay, I just need to be devoted to creating and make it a devotion to God, is what works for me now. It's just like, whew, this is the impulse that needs to flow through me, that wants to flow through me. I surrender. This is my assignment. Cool. This is what needs to be written. I'm going to make time to write this. I'm going to make time to express this. Oh, you want me to lead in this way? I'm going to make time to do that. And making that be the success, right? And not putting, I realize like there's no outcome or no achievement that can be more significant than that actual container, that actual time dedicated to creating, right? And that allows me to surrender in a new way, because I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm here to do, right? And can you imagine if we make sacred time to dedicate to what we feel we need to do, what comes with that? That state is a prosperous state in and of itself, but everything else is going to flow from that. Because usually what slows us down is we're like, shit, is this going to work? But if we just did it, it works. But usually we think about it, and so we're like, I'm going to force myself to do it so it works. But what if just doing it is the thing, Yeah, so that connection for me is like, it is my duty to do this work. Not following these impulses is really me not being successful, not being prosperous, regardless of how much money I'd be able to make in another situation.
I think it's really, really, really interesting what you say about the state in which you create your work implicates the product of it. Because I think back to all the times when I've created out of anxiety. And that is, I think, a large part, like being a content creator and being on social media. We get into these states where it's fight or flight. We are so anxious. We need that video. And I even found myself in it, like before you came, I was going to post a video and Daisy was like, you need to do it right now. And I was like, well, I was going to post it. And then I didn't. And I reflected on it after. And I was like, I was caught up in it again, like the sense of urgency. And it only makes sense when you're creating, when you're connected to yourself and you're connected to the fact that you know that you're everything and that you have limitless power and you can do anything. You will let go fully and you will be so connected to this moment that I think that's where the magic really happens. And I think when you're trying to force it so much, and I have caught myself in this so many times of I'm doing this to get something out of it. I kind of realized this about like so many things in my life. Like I didn't know how to do things just to do them. I didn't know how to do things without wanting something from it. And it's just that tendency comes up over and over again. And it's the recognition of like, oh my God, I'm missing my life because I'm missing right now. So I think that is so interesting, like how being present, we could talk about the importance of being present in a relationship, being present and just being in life. But even when it comes down to what feels like the most core foundational part of our existence, which doesn't have to be, but in the way society views it. And honestly, because it does play a pivotal role. We can't deny that money is really important. Like that's been a huge thing too, recognizing that no, it's okay to want to make a lot of money, but how we can then generate that by tapping into this presence. That really seems to just be, I don't know, I think that's so profound, because it's like if you're creating out of fear, you're likely going to produce out of fear. Why do you think our podcast episodes are the ones that we have to just fully let go? And it's just because you are now embodying that. So the work is just you, because it's always just you. And I think that realization is like, woof. So many people is like, I don't need to try so hard. I don't even need to try at all.
Yeah, it's 100%. I love that. Yeah, it's like I don't need to try. Like, look at all the reasons why I can't trust or can't be my full self, right? At least for me, that becomes the work, And I think it's all real, like if you had experience of being rejected or being shamed for being yourself, when I think about myself, it's like masculinity, sexuality, being smart, like being a kid, all of that came with rejection, And so it's like, now I'm going to put myself out there. I'm a social being. I don't want to get rejected, And so I think there's the part of like, this all makes sense. And at least for me, through a connection of like, oh, this is my duty. I let go, let myself be this vessel. And the vessel is just me. I'm just being myself to the max. That is the work,
I'm freaking out. I have a lot of thoughts. So I was having a lot of thoughts, but I think whenever we feel like our career is stalling, our relationships are stalling, our interests are stalling, our financial freedom is stalling, we look to these exact things and we're like, where is the problem? We look at these things that are failing and we're like, why is this failing? Or why, maybe not even failing, but why does it feel stagnant? Why does it feel maybe not challenging or exciting? Like, why am I bored? And I think the answer is, it always comes back to, you are at a point where you need to rise to the occasion and figure out what the work is that you need to do. And it's not easy. That's really hard. It can be 6 months where you're in that state and you're like, oh, I was supposed to be doing work on myself. The work is not within my career. It's actually me. It's the energy that I'm exuding because I'm not doing the work. That's what I'm realizing right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's like the seasons, Like if we look at nature, it's like there's a season where it's like we are not going to plant trees now, And I think that's the hard thing, is because we're disconnected from the body. And if you think about the body is like Mother Earth, And so we're like, fuck seasons, like no. Go, and so, yeah, 100%. And I think that's the beauty too of like seeing like unpleasant parts of life as having value, because then we can appreciate them. Right. But I think our society treats it as like anything unpleasant we want to avoid. We treat it as bad. But if you label anything unpleasant as bad, like we're going to have unpleasant times in our life. And so then we feel like we're doing something wrong, or we need to get out of it, or we need to avoid it. But if we're just like, oh, I'm going to feel uncomfortable because I left my job, I'm putting myself out there, and I broke up with my partner, or like a family member is sick, or like whatever. But that is life. And we can't just be like, no, spiritually bypass or like logically be like, I should be fine. Like my cat got sick, but it's a spirit and I should be fine. It's like, no, you got to be with that. You're like that's important, And so I think there's this process of like, I think so much of this spiritual expansion is coming back and like humbling ourselves a bit, Yeah, and I think through that humility, then we get to the point of like, oh, I'm everything, but we get to it from a state of humility versus a state of like judgment, which I feel like is like a different energy. Yeah, life's good. At least life has taught me. I remember I had my moments where it's so funny, right? I feel like I had my moments where my relationship to God, I think, is a big thing, right? Like there's a point where I wasn't religious at all or spiritual at all, but then there was a point where I was like, I am God, and I still believe I'm God, but my association with that my association with that is completely different. There's a point of I am God where it's like I can just manipulate everything and
Have you seen Bruce Almighty?
I don't really remember it.
He becomes God, and he manipulates everything for his own selfish reasons.
Yeah.
And everything goes to shit.
Exactly.
And then God at the end is like, well, there's all these things that need to happen. Have you done that yet? And then he does it in major switch.
That's it. That's literally what I was expressing. Exactly, right? It goes from like there's like a lack of compassion, in the initial version. And then yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there's a point now where I feel like I'm able to have that feeling of God, but have that feeling of God in like a sense of like, however I am meant to be used, allow me to be used. And I feel like that's where the humility comes in, where it's like, okay, I'm here to help people do this. This is the impulse I'm getting. This is the download I'm getting. Okay, cool. Like, I don't need it to go the way I think it should go anymore.
Well, I don't think you're approaching it with love.
Exactly, right. And I think we get insights into like what we're curious about, what excites us, all that stuff. And I think it's valuable to follow that. And I feel like if we are just showing up in a sense of like, I need this to go this way, it doesn't allow you to be of service in the way that creates flow,
Yeah. And it's like knowing maybe the what, but you don't know the how. Trusting that I'm going to do this, I'm going to have a successful podcast one day, and the how will flow. This has been an incredible conversation.
So this episode has been very special because when I like learn something, not necessarily knowledge or intellect, but like physically, like emotionally, like I'm humbled, like understand, like I feel like I've taken away so much from this episode. And this is exactly, I feel like personally, like this is what I needed. Like this episode reminds me why I love podcasting. Like in a way, I feel like we've been talking so much and it's great, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not being practiced in a way that you feel connected to it, at least, or connected to yourself. So I really appreciate you coming here and being so you and being so palpable. Like I'm sure there's no doubt that the listeners will be able to like feel this episode, because you always can. But this is a pivotal episode for me. Thanks, Kyle, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this was really great. And I appreciated just the thoughtfulness and the space that you created. I felt very comfortable and I felt like I could just be myself. So thanks for that.
That's beautiful. I think doing that is what drives everything. So thank you so much for being here. Do you want to let the listeners know where they can find you? Anything you're working on now?
Yeah. So my Instagram has the links to everything. So at Kyle, Kyle, Somersall, Somersall. And yeah, that's where you can find me. Feel the energy. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of free things that I'm recently sharing and I will be sharing to help people heal and be on this path and really heal with the intention of being able to follow their purpose. So simultaneously following their purpose as they heal, and their purpose really just being the most them they can be. That's really what it is.
Well, everyone, you should definitely go check out Kyle's stuff. We're going to link it in our show notes as always. But thank you so much, Kyle. This has been incredible. And I look forward to staying connected on your journey, seeing what's next, and having you on the pod again. I mean, we got to do some check-ins, see what's going on. And I think this energy is really great. So I think we'll definitely stay in touch.
Amazing. Thank you. I look forward to it. Yeah, I look forward to building and seeing all the things you create and contributing, however I can to that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.